Ours is the grasping golden hand. We are desire. We are Corpus.
The Corpus are one of the most powerful factions in the Warframe universe, and play a significant role in nearly all of the major events that take place in the Origin system, with notable leaders such as Aladvi and Nephanio being regular cast members in the story of Warframe, and having vast amounts of influence and power within the Corpus board, and by extension, the Origin system as a whole. While they're both Corpus, they actually despise one another quite a bit, and on top of that, almost the entire board of directors within the Corpus hate each other, with the board being led by the mysterious Freud Beck, with incredibly little actually being known about him. This hate for one another has actually led to constant Corpus infighting, which has led to them losing major battles against their primary enemies, the Grineer, one of which involved losing an entire planet, Mars, when the board refused to continue backing Aladvi's war efforts against General Sargus Rook. Not only that, but without the Tenno stopping Council of Rayhek's Formorian fleets, the Corpus probably would have either been completely destroyed or subjugated by the Grineer. This constant infighting has led to them falling far behind the Grineer when it comes to dominance over the Origin system, even though they're far more advanced and carry better weaponry and armor. Even though this infighting and competition between the Corpus leaders has been so detrimental towards their cause, there's no sign of it stopping, and it's important to discuss why. The Corpus have been studying tenets left to them by their godlike leader, Parvos Granum, and have essentially interpreted these tenets to mean to pursue wealth no matter what, and be as cutthroat as possible while achieving this goal, even when it comes to those who are supposed to be your very own allies. This perversion of what Parvos Granum has originally meant when he created the tenets of the Corpus is leading to the downfall of the Corpus, with them quite literally at times being propped up by their enemies, the Tenno, because they are the lesser evil between them and the Grineer. And this perversion of the tenets would have continued to go unchecked if it wasn't for the recent return of the Corpus god, Parvos Granum, whose new sole goal is to correct the path of the current Corpus. In this video, we'll be talking about the original rise of Parvos Granum, his disappearance, and then ultimately his return to the Origin system, and how his return may affect the current power structure in a Corpus that is still recovering from the new war. Centuries ago, the Origin system wasn't similar to how we're familiar with it in the current day and age. There was no board of directors, there was no Grineer Empire, and a different faction ruled over the entirety of the system. A faction that was actually using the Grineer as slaves. The Corpus were the peasants that were responsible for completing the hardest tasks in the Empire without much reward. This faction that was in control was the all-powerful, the famous, the very handsome. They were the Origin. And this was the society that Parvos Granum was born in. And based on his status as a god in the current day and age, you may assume he started off as an all-powerful Origin. However, that's not the case. He wasn't handsome at all. Parvos was actually born into the poverty class, which was a class made up of the people that would eventually form the Corpus. Parvos Granum's entire family was made up of farmers who had to work extremely long hours and were paid almost nothing for the crops they sold. And on top of that, were provided almost no amenities by their leaders, regardless of how hard they worked. Parvos' brother was a particularly hard worker, and would often work himself to exhaustion in the fields, along with their father. And both of which were actually extremely proud of their farm, even though they didn't get much from it, and they were constantly taken advantage of by the Origin. I mean, everyone was, but still.
Day after day, we toiled. My father, my brother Claudius, pulling grains for the Orichan takers in the city, as our kind had done for generations. We were young, but the work made us old. Our backs ached, our hands bled, the sun tortured our skin. In the worst times, it felt as though death would claim us before the day was through. It was on one such afternoon that I was fated to first hear that glorious sound. A whisper I strained to hear, in a tongue not of man, but of something else, something grander, a language I understood instinctively, the language of desire. It said, "Fear not poverty. Poverty is the bitter soil in which sweet desire blossoms."
This entire situation enraged Parvos Granum, not only because he saw how he and his family were being taken advantage of, but because how okay his family was with it. It disgusted him. He constantly tried to convince his brother to do something about it, since regardless of how he felt about his brother, he respected the immense strength and physical power his brother had, and saw his physical ability as a chance to make something for their family. However, his brother shot down all of his ideas that would see him rise through the social classes. Oftentimes, Parvos would fantasize about having a sister, one who would scheme with him and help feed his ambitious goals, instead of his less than motivated brother and father.
My brother was a witless man, happy as a hog, face down in the trough. No thought of the farmer's axe. He was a brute above my asperous constitution, yet he had not the will nor the guile to let me guide that brawn. So, in my youth, I often imagined I had another sibling, a specter of sorts, a sister. And in my mind, she and I, oh, how we would conspire. Great schemes, risk trades, rapacious plots. And should I ever find myself back in the trough, penniless, betrayed, rich only in enemies, she'd be at my side, axe in hand.
While Parvos wishing he has a sister isn't important in this part of the story, it will come into play later in this video. Parvos was not like his brother when it came to physical strength. However, for what he lacked in strength, he made up for in pure ambition, and decided to take his fate into his own hands. Tired of being a lowly farmer, by the way, I love farmers, guys, there's nothing wrong with being a farmer. Tired of being a lowly farmer under the boot of the Orcan, so he ran to the nearest large Orcan city, hoping that there his fortune would take a turn and he'd be able to live the life that he felt him and his family deserved. In all honesty, Parvos' story has sounded a lot like a lot of real stories. Like in the real world, he sounded like, you know, people looking for better lives all over. I mean, there are countless people who have left the farming community behind, or, you know, any rural community behind, in pursuit of the potential that comes with living in the big city. However, when Parvos actually reached the big city, everything was a little bit off the rails. He's immediately enraged, seeing the splendor and wealth on display in the Orcan city, and views it as almost a mocking gesture against him and all of the lower class.
The city, those towers, I was struck with awe. What glorious totems of greed these Orcan had built. Built on our backs. Their wealth was my wealth. I was starved, while our masters were fat and full and warm. They flaunted their wealth, left it sitting there for the taking. Priceless gemstones decorating the tower gates. I was afraid, but the whisper gave me courage. Be envious, covet, then take what you desire. So that is what I did.
Because of his anger, he made a somewhat foolish move, and screamed, "I take what I am owed," before ripping some of the jewels from the gate in an attempt to steal them. Okay, maybe that wasn't just a somewhat foolish move, it was a downright stupid move. Like, you're telling me you couldn't have tried to be a little bit sneakier? Like, they're the Orkin, dude. They're so unbelievably rich that they probably wouldn't have noticed you stealing some jewels unless you literally screamed that you were. Which is exactly what he did. While he attempted to run, he was quickly captured by city guards who, no doubt, were made aware of his thievery by him literally announcing it to the world. As punishment, the guards dragged him to the city center and cut off his left hand with a plasma dagger, which I'm guessing was probably a little bit, tiny bit, extremely painful. However, while they were in the process of dragging him there and removing his hand, he was able to actually consume and eat one of the jewels before the rest were taken from him and returned. Now, once again, this wasn't necessarily the smartest decision ever by Parvos. It's honestly an incredible surprise that he was ever able to become as successful and legendary as he was because of these terrible decisions. The reason I'm saying that is because eating a ruby dough is basically a death sentence, and it literally started to burn up his insides while he tried to make it back to his family's farm, after losing his left hand. Somehow, with his insides literally being burned and melted inside him, he made it back to his family farm, where he promptly fainted, with the ruby dough still inside him. His father and brother eventually got him to wake up, which resulted in him puking up the jewels. Somehow, with his arm cut off, and his insides actually on fire, Parvos managed to live through pure will and determination. Along with escaping to stay with his life, he also managed to escape with the jewel.
I was brash and bold. I struck at midday. I cried, "I take what I am owed," as I ripped jewels from their tower gates and ran. I did not get far. For my blasphemy, they dragged me to the tower square, throwing me to the ground in front of the sneering crowd of Orkin servants that mingled there. The guards held aloft my satchel, containing the proof of my crime. I grasped at it, determined to reclaim what was mine. He snatched my arm, held me high, and, with a dash of his plasma dagger, severed my left hand. The crowd jeered, yet I felt no pain, only clarity, for the whisper was with me again. It said, "Deception is the sword of wisdom. Be wise." They took my hand that day, but they did not take what I had earned. I crawled back to the fields, where I collapsed before my father and my brother. I was so near death, they read my Navarites. My brother Claudius bemoaned me as a fool. How could I have abandoned them? Guilt washed over me. I asked the whisper, was he right? And the whisper replied, beware the idle man who would lull you back to idleness. Hearing this, I felt the life force stream back into me. I sat up. They protested. I stood, and they tried to pull me down. I was too strong. There was now a fire in my chest that would not be denied. Moving swiftly from sickbed to field, I fell to my knees beneath that relentless sun, my chest afire as it moved to my throat, robbing me of breath. Certain death had finally found me. I made one last heave. I spat it out. A molten red gemstone, of the purest, clearest rubido. Swallowing that stone would have killed a man of weaker will, but not a man sustained by the power of desire. It was worth more than my family had made in 10 generations. It would fetch enough to feed us all for a lifetime. As I stared into its brilliant facets, a familiar voice rushed through me. Contentment is idleness. Desire inspires action. Nurture all desires. And so, with my brother and father pleading for my return, I once again left for the city.
Which was worth a significant amount of more money than all of the produce that him and his family had farmed for generations. Not just him, his brother, and his father, but entire generations of farming was worth less than this one singular jewel. All it took was Parvos sacrificing his left hand, and he had successfully escaped poverty forever. In another frighteningly stupid decision, though, Parvos returned to the city he stole the ruby dough from in order to pawn it off for a financial loan. I don't think I have to explain why returning to the scene of the crime is stupid, but somehow it once again worked out for Parvos. With the loan he received, he then loaned the money to other people in similar positions as him, and then preached to them his statutes. He spoke of the importance of desire and the sin of contentment and idleness. The people he loaned to began to idolize him and started loaning off parts of their own wealth and spreading his word, until eventually there was an entire society dedicated to the teaching of desire. Eventually, Parvos gained such a ridiculous amount of wealth, he crafted a mechanical replacement left hand made completely out of gold, making him an even more grandiose and legendary figure to his followers. He went on for a while, spreading the word of desire and accumulating an insane amount of wealth, enough to put him on par with any Oregon. Eventually, he heard that his father had collapsed while working on the farm, and he hurried back to his childhood home in order to see his father one last time before death. Unfortunately, Parvos was not able to make it in time, and he returned home to find his father dead. Promising to ensure that no one else would work to death in his family's fields, he destroyed all of the fields, despite his brother's protests, and created a giant city called Corpus, a city where all were welcomed, poor and rich alike, as long as they were filled with desire and the urge to progress. Corpus was essentially where you would go to accomplish the American dream in Warframe, except I guess they probably call it the Corpusium dream. And I might be biased here since I'm an American, but I don't think it sounds as good as the American dream. Anyway, with the establishment of Corpusium, the people who lived there becoming known as the Corpus, Parvos Granum had successfully left his legacy on the Orcan system, and had arisen to levels of wealth never seen before by anyone other than the Orcan.
In desire, I was wealthy, but in strategy, I was empty-handed. I listened for the whisper. It said, money begets money. With my jewel as collateral, I secured a loan. And with that sum, I gave my own loans to poor men like me who desired more. With each loan, I dispensed truths I had learned from the whisper. Those men went out into the world and they too made loans. And their money too begat money. Word spread fast. Men flocked to hear me. I told them of the evils of contentment and idleness. I taught them the gift of desire. In time, my money multiplied into multitudes. With this wealth, I made my body whole again. Then news came. Father had collapsed in the field. I rushed back to my family's humble farm to be by his side, but his death was sudden. Claudius mourned, but I was committed to ending the brutal labor my family and people had endured for generations. The whisper approved, It said, charity is power. More charity is more power. Claudius begged me to stop my megadoses. If you build a city on these fields, what will we eat? To which I replied, just as I consumed the gemstone that fed my fortune, our people will eat the wealth I have bestowed upon them. What of our home, he cried, our traditions? I pondered this until the whisper gave me the words. Shun sentimentality. It is a weakness that binds the idle man. I believe my father would have smiled with pride as I smashed our family home into the dirt. It saddens me that father did not live to see the glory of Corposium, the city I erected upon our meager land. Men of desire will always be outnumbered by idle men, men of fear. But small men can never hold back men of strength and desire. Fulfill desire, and others will follow. My gift to the future is an idea that wealth need not settle as a crust upon the upper echelons of the populace. No. Any poor grain farmer can, should he feed his desire and apply his wisdom, take fortune for himself. The more, the better. And when men of fortune come together under great leadership, their potential is exponential. Just as my money replaced what the Orokin took from me and made my body whole again, our collective desire will create a new body. A body forged of fortune and unencumbered by idleness or sentimentality. Ours is the grasping golden hand. We are desire. We are Corpus.
Coming up with an accurate description of Parvos Granum's personality is completely unique when compared to almost every other villain in the game. And to be clear, I do use the term villain loosely when it comes to Parvos Granum, because he's more of an enemy of the Tenno than he really is like a bad guy when it comes to his presence in the Warframe. And he's not even always an enemy to the Tenno in all honesty. But anyway, not only is he difficult to pin down personality-wise, because he's not just a villain, but because we honestly don't have a ton of information to work with when talking about him. And most of the information is honestly from when he was younger and a kid. I mean, he's like hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Well, hundreds. So, I mean, going off his personality as a child isn't really the best bet here. However, there are a few traits that are extremely prevalent and important. And that's Parvos' willingness to work extremely hard and dissatisfaction with remaining idle in life. Throughout his entire life, Parvos has never stopped desiring more and more things. Once he achieves and gains one thing, he moves on to having the desire for something else. There's a lot of complexity in this though. When people think of greed or desire, they typically think of just money or power. But when it comes to Parvos, it's literally everything, because he achieved all of the wealth and power he could possibly want. And he has still desired for more. He desired for his legacy to be even greater. He desired to create more and more advanced technology. He wanted to change how the universe worked as a whole. This thirst for all things, knowledge, wealth, power, made him not only incredibly intelligent, but also unlike any other character we interact with in Warframe. On top of that, Parvos didn't attain these things through corrupt means for the most part. Yes, he did start his entire rise by stealing a gemstone, but other than that, he has had an almost completely honorable rise to power, which is surprising if you're aware of how the Corpus acts in the current day and age. This actually translates into him actually being a somewhat kind personality when compared to pretty much other when compared to pretty much every other main villain in the game, besides for rare outliers like Talregger. When subordinates of Parvos Granum do well, he rewards them and treats them well. He'll provide them with the most sublime equipment available, and he'll make sure they're in the best possible position to be as effective as possible. As long as his men and women are working hard, that's all that really matters. Well, unless they're failures. Because he treats those who fail, or he deems as lazy, as completely worthless and unable to even cooperate with anymore. He even shows disdain for the sisters he recruits if they fail and die fighting the Tenno. Basically, if you fail, Parvos will treat you just as badly as pretty much every other single enemy leader in the game. However, if you succeed, he'll treat you very well, and he also gives you the best possible odds so that he can see you succeed, which might be why he gets so mad at failure, because he felt as though he did his part in assuring your success. When it comes to actually having an emotional connection with others, we don't have a ton of examples. Parvos is generally seen as an honorable and reasonable businessman, with businessman being the key word. He doesn't let emotions get the better of him, and he seems to limit his emotional output overall. The only time we ever really see him in any sort of emotional state is when he grew angry with how his family was treated by the Organ, and then the grief and rage he felt when his father died. He also had some sort of weird attraction to having a sister, and started the Sisters of Parvos because of it. There's potential for some serious mother issues there, and like this isn't a joke or anything. He has an entire order dedicated to strong, powerful women that are closer to him and more dedicated to him than anyone else in the entire existence of the Corpus. I'm not going as far as to say there's some sort of sexual gratification from this, because that would be fucking insane to just say right now without explicit evidence. There's very obviously something surrounding Parvos and women, based on his mother never being mentioned in the story and his obsession with having a sister. Besides for this trauma issue type thing he's got going on, and the rage he felt for the treatment of his family, we don't have a ton of evidence of emotional moments involving Parvos Granum. His personality ultimately boils down to a smart, shrewd businessman who will do whatever it takes to advance, no matter what he might be advancing in. I think something that's important to bring up here is that Parvos Granum has had his success during the downfall of the Orcan Empire. However, by no means was the Orcan Empire not the leading force in the system at his point of success. And on top of that, Parvos Granum was successful despite the Orcan, not alongside the Orcan. They were not happy with a lowly farmer amassing as much wealth and power as he did. In fact, the greatest technological marvel that Parvos Granum ever developed or came up with was the implementation of the Spectre particle theory. You know all those imprints you use of your own Warframe of Clem and pretty much everything else in the entire fucking universe? That's Spectre particle theory, baby. And the creator was Parvos himself. So say thank you right now, all you ungrateful Tenno out there. He developed one of the most advanced and powerful pieces of technology in the entire existence of the Origin system. To actually progress to the point he was able to come up with this Spectre technology, he actually stole information from Entrati. And while the Orcan were not happy with this, and sent an assault team of Warframes after Parvos, Parvos, being the genius that he is, saw this coming and set his particle research lab to explode, and with it exploding, he destroyed an undetermined amount of Warframes, but it was at least a lot. However, not all Orcan were upset with Parvos' developments, or upset with the fact he was stealing research from Entrati. And it just so happened that the Orcan who didn't seem to mind as much was the legendary and all-powerful Ballas. Parvos hadn't just stolen research involving the Spectre particle theory, he had also managed to steal some of Entrati's most important and dangerous research, his research into time. Now, any normal person might have second thoughts about delving into anything to do with manipulating time, especially if you were delving into from research you stole and not research you did, because that would mean your understanding of the topic would be even lower than the one who researched it. But Parvos was no normal person, and saw time as the next thing he must advance into. Parvos saw and respected the power of the Warframes that invaded his labs, and he imagined an all-powerful weapon, a weapon that combined the time research he had stolen, along with the Warframes he had witnessed. This is when he had the early idea for the Warframe Protea, a powerful Warframe capable of influencing time. While in practice, like when we actually use the Warframe, we don't get much abilities to control time with, which kind of sucks when it comes to Protea. However, lore-wise, Protea goes absolutely insane when it comes to time manipulation and opening alternate dimensions and all that crazy ass shit. I don't exactly know every piece of her powers because it's just like undetermined, but whatever. Like I said, we don't get to see much of that. But it is important to know that lore-wise, Protea is pretty fucking insane and nearly impossible to stop. Anyway, back to the lore. Parvos Granum had realized that there was some betrayal fermenting in the ranks of the Corpus. Members of the board he created, members of the empire he started, were allowing themselves to be consumed by greed, which shouldn't be surprising. He should have saw that shit coming, because the line between greed and desire is very, very thin. And well, that greed was driving them to fight for more control over the Corpus, and overall, more wealth and power within the Origin system. This is the background reason why creating a Warframe capable of time control was so interesting to Parvos. Because he sniffed out Betrayal was coming, and he wanted to create an insanely powerful bodyguard to ensure he didn't lose his position on top of the Corpus. However, as smart as Parvos Granum was, he wasn't sure how Warframes were actually created, or how he would implement time control into the one he may have captured or defeated. Because of this, he had to seek out help from the man himself, Ballas. And Ballas, as we mentioned earlier, had no problem working with someone who had stolen from the Orchid. In fact, Ballas was more than eager to work with Parvos to get his hands on the time manipulation research that Entrati had been working on. While we aren't entirely sure what Ballas got out of the deal with Parvos to help him create the Protea Warframe, I imagine it was just having access to the time manipulation research, and maybe some other behind the door things that we aren't familiar with in the current day and age. This deal happened hundreds of years ago after all. Anyway, Ballas and Parvos collaborated in creating the Protea Warframe and the Protea, the child of two fathers. Now, while they did say that Protea was the child of two fathers, I cannot deny nor confirm if Ballas and Parvos were engaged in a homosexual relationship. We need more lore to drop before I can confidently confirm or deny that theory. Anyway, that's the story of how and why Protea was created, with a purpose to protect and guard Parvos, no matter what.
At last, esteemed Parvos, tell me what you desire, and we shall furnish you.
My desire is well known to you. Assemble what I have designed, and I shall be on my way.
Potent weaponry, exquisite anatomy, those are trivial. But temporal manipulation, even the Entrati.
The Entrati have violated time, and I have violated them.
It's also pretty interesting to me that there wasn't some sort of betrayal mechanic rigged into Protea. I mean, we all know how Ballas works, and it's surprising that he just straight up helped create the Warframe for Parvos without, putting any little backstabby measures into it. Maybe he thought Parvos was too smart to trick with that sort of thing, or maybe he just didn't really see Parvos as a threat, because even though the Corpus were obviously on the rise at this point in the Origin system, they most likely wouldn't have lasted long if someone like Ballas deemed them as something to really worry about. Anyway, the point is that Parvos had now access to a time control Warframe. He had struck a deal with the most powerful person in the entire system, Ballas, cementing his importance in the Origin system itself. I mean, shaking hands with the king makes you legit, and it showed how far Parvos had risen from his lowly farm work. Shortly after creating Protea, Parvos found himself in a little tiny bit of trouble, as the Corpus board of directors were getting ready to backstab him in an insane coup attempt to wrestle more control of the Corpus conglomerate. I don't even know why I put that word in the script, because there was zero chance I was saying that correctly, but we all know what I mean. Anyway, this betrayal would take shape while Parvos was traveling, and his would-be assassins sabotaged his void drive. While I'm not exactly sure what was supposed to happen with the sabotage void drive, I do have two theories. Either they expected the entire ship to explode, killing everyone inside, or they hoped that the void drive would transport Parvos extreme distances away from the civilization, which would then result in his death. Either way, whatever they were doing or hoping would happen did not work, because of that trusty Warframe Protea that Ballast just helped Parvos create. Protea somehow managed to teleport Parvos into the void while using her time powers. I'm not going to get into how this works in all honesty, because I have no fucking clue. Look, I'm not Entrati here, I don't have his research, I'm just the guy who talks about what happened. Maybe I'll give Entrati a phone call or something, but I'm not going to pretend to understand how you get to the void with time manipulation. It just happens. Well, after thinking about it, I guess the Corpus board of directors at the time did get what they want. I mean, they wanted Parvos to disappear so they could take over. And while disappearing into the void kind of fits that goal. So I take it back, the Corpus board of directors did succeed. They just didn't get Parvos killed like they had hoped. Parvos was trapped in the void, while the Orcan Empire was still the most powerful force in the system, meaning that he's been locked in the Granum Void for literally centuries. I imagine that some sort of Protea time manipulation or void magic made him functionally immortal though. I mean, it's not normal for people to live literally centuries, so there had to be something going on in that void to keep him alive until present day. However, before we start talking about the re-emergence of the legendary Parvos Granum, let's actually talk a little bit about how the Corpus changed while he was gone. After Parvos was betrayed by the Corpus board and left to rot in the void, many would imagine an immediate decline for the Corpus because they lost a very effective leader. The one who literally created the Corpus and managed to create a group that was beginning to rival the Orcan in power and in wealth, which was extremely impressive. However, the Corpus didn't fall off after the disappearance of Parvos. The Corpus actually entered a sort of golden age, becoming more powerful than ever before. The reasoning for this isn't because Parvos was holding the Corpus back, or because the board of directors were such effective leaders, but actually because of the fall of the Orcan Empire at the time. With a huge power vacuum in the system, and the lack of a strong combined Grineer force yet, directly after the fall of the Orcan, the already powerful Corpus were primed to take over the Origin system, and that's exactly what happened. The Corpus entered a golden age, and were actually more powerful than ever. However, the lack of strong leadership would soon make itself apparent with the rise of the Grineer. See, after the fall of the Orcan, no one had any business taking over the Origin system besides the Corpus, but due to laziness of the new Corpus leaders, the Grineer slowly gained a foothold in the system, and after gaining a foothold, they eventually became the most powerful force in the Origin system. You see, the Corpus board of directors began doing the exact thing that Parvos had heavily stood against for so long, and that's the acceptance of your current position. Idleness. Instead of stomping out the Grineer as soon as they could, they slowly ignored them and allowed them to take and gain more power. And then, when the Grineer began taking plants and resources from the Corpus refused to help one another because they didn't see how they could personally benefit from it, leading to Corpus leaders having to fight against the united Grineer Empire without help. This laziness, greed, and selfishness led to the Grineer Empire eventually becoming the dominant force in the Origin system, as we're familiar with in the current day and age of Warframe. However, the tides may be changing with the re-emergence of Parvos Granum, which is what we'll get into now. The return of Parvos Granum was actually created through incompetency within the board of directors, due to the fact that they couldn't decide a vote on a certain issue, and it was constantly split, meaning they couldn't move on from it. Now, I couldn't find out what the actual issue was, or issues, I don't know if it's multiple or one, but this is about as close as we get to know it. With this excerpt from Nephania: 7, 4, 7 against, cast and recast 7 times. So it is decided. The fleet has been retrofitted and redeployed to begin at once. New lanes, trawling for old things, by Prophet and Void, by the blessed, handless founder. We hereby invoke
7 for, 7 against. Cast and recast 7 times. So, it is decided. The fleet has been retrofitted and redeployed to begin at once. New lanes. Trawling for old things. By prophet and void, by the blessed handless founder, we hereby invoke the Deadlock Protocol.
So from these voice lines, maybe it had something to do with the decision about the Corpus fleet, but I'm honestly not sure. However, another interesting thing that Nef Anyo mentioned in this dialogue was the invocation of the Deadlock Protocol. The Deadlock Protocol is a mandate that requires Corpus to install a successor to the founder, Parvos Granum, so that they could have control over making decisions when things are split. Now this is very confusing to me actually. Why would the Corpus need to install a successor when they already had a head of board in Freud Beck? And if something that had happened to Freud Beck, wouldn't they just vote for another head of board instead of installing an entire new leader with overall control? I don't know. I don't really understand much about the Corpus leadership, and I probably understand more than a lot of people, so that kind of goes and shows how confusing it is. Anyway, after invoking the Deadlock Protocol, Nef Anyo claimed that he was actually genetically related to Parvos Granum, and because of this relation, he should inherit the position as leader of the Corpus. Obviously, none of the Corpus board believed this claim and told Nef Anyo to fuck off, unless he had proof. And in all honesty, I feel like they'd tell him to fuck off even if he had proof, since Corpus aren't eager to give up power, especially as someone like Nef Anyo. I mean, remember, the original board betrayed Parvos Granum, who was an actual honorable leader, because they didn't want one Corpus with all the power. So there was actually zero chance of Nef Anyo ever leading the Corpus, whether he could prove he was Parvos Granum's heir or not. However, this fact didn't discourage Nef Anyo, and he began searching for Parvos Granum and somehow knew to search the void for him. Now, I'm not entirely sure how he knew where Nef Anyo was. Maybe you can search for life in the void somehow. I don't know. Or maybe the original Corpus board kept data where they think they sent him when they sabotaged his void drive. I don't know. I'm honestly not sure. However, Nef Anyo did manage to find him, or at least knew of his location. The problem for Nef Anyo was how to be able to actually get to him. It's also important to point out that at this point in time, Nef Anyo had believed that Parvos Granum was dead, and was hoping to only scan his body to find the genetic proof that they were related. I just think that's somewhat important to point out, because it would be unlikely that Nef Anyo would be searching for him if he would have known he was still alive. I mean, that would be a huge threat to his power among the Corpus. Anyway, Nef Anyo began kidnapping and sending Solaris United workers into the void to attempt to find where Parvos was at. Well, most of them were disintegrated and never made it to the void, but you get the point. He was using human sacrifices to attempt to find his lost long father, or genetic relative, I guess. I'm guessing it wasn't his father, but you get the point. Regardless, using the Solaris United in his scheme, and essentially using large amounts of them and getting them killed, is what eventually got the Tenno involved with all of this nonsense, since the Tenno are obviously close allies with the people of Solaris United. After learning what Nef Anyo was planning to do, a race to reach Parvos Granum in the Void began, and both the Tenno and Nef Anyo essentially ended up tying and finding Parvos Granum together at the same time. And to everybody's surprise, he was still alive and well, with a specter of his Protea Warframe still guarding him. Nef Anyo and Parvos meet for the first time, and, well, Nef began showering him with praise. The conversation doesn't actually end up very well for him though, and I'll just play the footage of that right here for you guys. I mean, who doesn't love to hear Nef Anyo get owned? Fuck that guy. He looks dumb as shit in that coffin costume as well.
Father, permit me to show you all I have built in your name. Do Nef Anyo that honor.
My name. I have watched you. Monuments to narcissism, demanding others sweat in your stead, gorging upon that which you have not earned. Watched as you claimed for yourself my teachings of self-reliance, perverting them into a flaccid philosophy of sloth, of idleness. Is that you, my son?
No, that must be a different son.
As you can see, Parvos wasn't particularly happy with Nephanio, and he then began his attempt to escape the Void and re-enter the Origin System. How Parvos was aware of everything going on in the Origin System while he was trapped in the Void eludes me. I mean, it kind of makes no sense, but apparently he had all the details, all the dirty little details. Maybe he really is a godlike figure. You know, maybe they were right, and they really did crack him up to be the true Corpus legend, the true god of the Corpus. But anyway, Parvos in this clip also spoke on how important it was for the Tenno to arrive in the Void, because it essentially allowed for his Protea Warframe to revive itself once his errant specters actually scanned the Warframes the Tenno sent after him. After scanning the Warframe, he used Protea to banish them from the Granum Void, and then begins using his specters to attack and take control of Nephanio's fleet. And the Solaris United workers who were still present in the area. They just keep getting screwed over and over again. I feel bad for the Solaris United dudes. They can never, ever catch a break. Because of the Solaris United members who were still in danger, the Tenno created a new powerful weapon, with the blueprint coming from Nephanio himself, and ran back into the Granum Void to try and help free those workers. However, in the middle of attempting to get back into the Void, Nephanio sabotaged his own ship's Void engines to ensure that Parvos Granum couldn't wrestle control of them. While the Tenno helped free the Solaris United members and fought the Protea Warframe, Parvos Granum exited the Void and made his way back into the Origin System. With him being able to do this because of the Void engines Nephanio was sabotaging. With Parvos sending his specters after the ships with the intent of getting Nephanio to activate the Void Drive, which meant that Neph played right into his dirty little golden hands. Well, one golden hand, the other one's normal. This shows us Parvos' intelligence and was likely a plan that he thought about throughout the hundreds of years that he was trapped in the Void. After freeing himself from the Granum Void, Parvos immediately sent this message to the Tenno, kind of keying them in on his future plans in the system, especially when it comes to the Corpus, and even the possible idea of creating a new type of Corpus, in which he offers the Tenno a seat among the board. The system shall change. No more clutching at sunk cost, imposed ideals, hand-me-down hopes. No, we are better than that. Corpus shall know a violent restructuring, but with time enough to face the impending threat from Tau with renewed and absolute vigor. Or not, perhaps the rot is too deep. Perhaps the father should abandon his children. Perhaps it is time for a new philosophy. Life's just a bargain like any other. Yours is no different. Would you like a seat at my new table? Perhaps with your masked friend alongside? The business, was it? A curious name. In Utica, of course. All people who know what they want. I know what they want, but what about you? Tell me, friend. What is it that you desire? Parvos got into rebuilding the Corpus almost immediately, with many of the major hubs of Corpus activity immediately getting behind him and following him, with the planets of Venus, Neptune, and Pluto all swearing loyalty to Granum and claiming that their Corpus territory was ultimately ruled by him. The remaining Corpus planets and territory is currently under the control of the Board of Directors, the biggest of which being the gas cities of Jupiter, which are, in my opinion, the most important hub of Corpus activity and probably somewhere that Parvos hopes to take over here soon. However, quickly converting nearly half of the Corpus Empire wasn't the only thing he did after his return. He also, insert callback here, created the Sisters of Parvos. I probably didn't actually insert the callback since I'm too lazy, but remember like 20 minutes ago when I said to him having a sister fetish wasn't important for his origin story? Well, now it is important, baby. Also, I have an entire video dedicated to the Sisters of Parvos, so after you finish this video, you should definitely go check out that video. It covers pretty much everything about the Sisters of Parvos, and more than we're going to get into here. During the Call of Tempestari quest, Valo Glorious gets banished into the Void by, well, the Tempestari. However, she gets rescued and put into a position of power by Parvos Granum himself. Granum establishes her as the leader of the Sisters of Parvos, the most powerful force in his Corpus military, where only females completely dedicated to him are allowed to join. Her job is to recruit and find females to recruit into this elite force. And yeah, it sounded a little bit kinky, guys. It sounded a little bit weird. I'm not gonna lie. Parvos quickly got active in the system once he got some of his Corpus power back, getting involved in multiple different campaigns. One notable campaign in his attempt to claim the Zariman 10-0, where his Corpus forces are in constant battle with the Spectres there and the Grineer. He's also actively looking for artifacts relating to Entradi, with him going to Drusus to help with this task. However, Drusus wasn't able to fulfill his part of the bargain, which led to Parvos claiming the Dante Laviria, which was then taken back by the Tenno. The reason that Parvos is so keen on Entradi artifacts is probably because of all, pretty much all of his most significant advancements and weapons were all created using Entradi's research as a base. So constantly searching for more remnants of Entradi is super in character for Parvos, and is probably one of his most important campaigns he's currently on, at least in his mind, besides, trying to fully reunite the Corpus. Finally, Parvos was big on trying to secure Jade during the Belly of the Beast quest, with the goal of using her to probably create some powerful weapons. His part in the quest honestly isn't too interesting or notable, besides him bringing up Ortis, who Ortis was before he was a Cephalon, which is definitely interesting, with Ortis being someone named Ordon Karis. Maybe that's a future video in the making. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. This was honestly the longest script I've ever used for a video, and this video obviously took tons of time. I mean, you can see the last time I uploaded for proof. It literally took me way too long. I really tried to get detailed and pretty much give you all there is to tell about Parvos Granum. I'm honestly pretty proud of what I came up with. I think this is one of the best scripts I've written, to be honest. I think it flows very well. I think it tells a good story. I think, it tells a lot about Parvos. I hope you guys agree with me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate a like, a sub, and a comment. Just help this video do well, because I really did put a lot of effort into it, and it kind of kept me, school kept me from uploading and working on as much as I want to. Then it also took so much time so I can upload my normal content. So it's like a combination of things going on here. And, I kind of need the bank. I kind of need the money, guys. So let this video do well, Watch the ads. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. I'm playing. But also not. Anyway, this script is hitting over 6,000 words. And that's not even like getting into the reading of the script, the editing, or the thumbnail work. So if you guys understand why I haven't been releasing this consistently and why I've been so busy with this school, I have been uploading more consistently on my gaming channel, which I will put in the description below. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This has been probably the video I'm the most proud of. So stay blessed, guys. Stay happy. I hope to see you guys in the next one, and I will try to be more consistent in the future, because the next few projects I have planned aren't necessarily meant to be as long or as big as this one. Pause. But yeah, stay blessed, guys. Peace out.